Conversation with the Candidate continues.
Welcome back to our conversation with the candidate, and our candidate tonight, Beto O'Rourke, former congressman from Texas, now running for president in the New Hampshire primary. We're going to jump right into it with our town hall questions from our New Hampshire voters, and we're going to start with Marie Mulroy.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to New Hampshire.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, and I guess my question for you is, what would be your first executive order when you get elected?
Yeah, there's so many things for us to take on, right? But let's, at a minimum, start with these. Reunite every child who's been separated from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border. That torture that we're visiting on them, that uncertainty of when or if they'll ever see their parents again. Let's make sure that we do the right thing immediately. I'll also take executive action given the fact that climate change is happening and poses the largest existential threat, not just to this country, but to the planet. So we will crack down on methane emissions by executive order. We will stop all oil and gas exploration on federal lands and offshore from the United States. And we will make sure that we pursue a vigorous plan to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. By 2030, we will be halfway there. And to do that, we'll have to start on day one. So those are a few of the steps that we'll take.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you. Next question comes from Carolyn Morrill.
Hi there.
Hi.
August 31st, I received a telephone message from my son saying, "Mom, I'm okay. Active shooting. I'm safe in lockdown." He is in Odessa. So obviously I want to ask you a question about gun control. When everyone else is tightening their laws, Texas has loosened it up, allowing guns at churches and school properties. What was the main rationale for Texas to do that?
Politics, the NRA, members of the State House and State Senate thinking that their re-election would be assured if they pandered to the gun lobby, completely ignoring the fact that we've now had 4 mass shootings in just the last 2 years. Santa Fe High School, Sutherland Springs Church, people shot and killed where they prayed. El Paso, Texas, 22 people killed in a Walmart with an AK-47, a weapon designed for war and combat to kill people as effectively, as efficiently as possible, used against us in our civilian lives. And then, as you just mentioned, in Midland, in Odessa. And I'm so sorry that anyone had to experience either the violence directed against them or the fear and uncertainty of being in a lockdown situation. So how do we confront this? We need to pass a really bold agenda that has as its center saving the lives of our fellow Americans. Universal background checks, red flag laws to stop someone who owns a gun if they pose a harm to themselves or someone else. Ending the sale of these AK-47s and AR-15s. But we must go further. We must have mandatory licensing, regulation of registry of the guns that we have, and we must also buy back the AR-15s and AK-47s. The question that you asked implies that it's going to be difficult to do in Texas or in the United States. And from listening to the people of Texas and listening to the people of the country on this campaign, I'm not so sure anymore. I have listened to them. They've told me they have children as well. They're concerned about their kids' safety. They don't accept that we lose 40,000 of our fellow Americans to gun violence every year, and they want to do something about it. Owners of AR-15 saying, "I will gladly give it back or destroy it if it will help to save lives." We just need political leadership that reflects their interests, not that of the NRA. And that's why I not only don't accept help from the NRA, I don't accept a single dime from a single political action committee, corporation, lobbyist, or special interest. It's all people all the time, and I want to make sure that we save the lives of our fellow Americans, and that's what I will do as president. Thank you for asking.
Quick follow-up, Congressman. What if there's a citizen who owns an AR-15, obeys the law, practices gun safety? Why are they part of the problem?
I'll tell you, we were on one of these March for Our Lives organized by young people in our community. And all these great activists and advocates, students, who are going to make sure that we lead on this issue in the vacuum of leadership from our politicians and elected officials. And I remember coming to the end of that march, I had my 8-year-old son, Henry, on my shoulders. And waiting for us at the end of the march were men who were holding AR-15s and AK-47s. And Henry's like, "Dad, what's going on here? I thought we were just marching against this. Why is somebody showing up with one of these guns that I'm used to seeing in movies about war?" And I said, "You know what? Don't pay them any mind. Don't give them any attention. They're just trying to make a point." That weapon, and this is what I should have told him, that is an instrument of intimidation. a tool of terror. It is that kind of weapon that killed people in that Walmart, people who were killed for their ethnicity or their presumed immigration status. It's why people in El Paso, Hispanics all over this country, now tell me they feel like they have a target on their back. As long as there are millions of AK-47s and AR-15s out there, it inspires the kind of fear that those terrorists want us to feel. Though it is a difficult political step for us to take, it is a necessary one if we're going to reduce that fear, if we're going to save the lives of our fellow Americans. And so as president, I will take that step and we will buy those weapons back.
Next question comes from Kenneth Berlin.
Hi, Congressman. Welcome.
Thank you, Ken.
You know, we've heard the term comprehensive immigration reform since 1803. And what I want to ask you is, what could you do in your first 100 days to get immigration reform issues passed if, God forbid, the Republicans hold the Senate? And also, what are your thoughts on using executive orders if you can't get anything through in the first 100 days?
Yeah, this is touches on some of the questions that we've been asked already. How do we get sensible gun legislation passed when you have legislators from states like Texas or New Hampshire or your own governor, folks, who vetoed 3 very sensible measures passed by your legislature? How are we going to make progress on this stuff? How do we come to grips with the fact that we lost 7 children in our custody and care at the U.S.-Mexico border, that there are tens of thousands now who've been forced to remain in place in Mexico thanks to our migrant protection protocols, this kind of Orwellian phrase that denies the reality that we're visiting a cruelty and torture on these kids. I think by elevating those children and their families and their stories, that can only help but compel Democrats and Republicans and independents alike to do the right thing, shock the conscience of the country, and force us to acknowledge what is being done in our name right now. When the president began a zero-tolerance policy last summer and was separating by force children from their parents, deporting their parents back to the country of origin, putting the kids in cages, and then sending them to a tent camp city in Tornillo in the Chihuahuan desert just outside of El Paso, more than 1,000 of us showed up in the wake of that. We bore witness, we testified back to our fellow Americans, and we put the political pressure on the administration until they changed that policy. A Republican administration, but the Republican administration of Donald Trump, one of the most hateful men towards Hispanics and immigrants that this country has ever seen. In that example, I saw the power of people, and that power will be brought to bear in our administration to rewrite our immigration laws in the image of the people of Manchester, of the people of El Paso, of the people of a country of asylum seekers and immigrants and refugees from the world over, and their sons and daughters. And that means legalizing the presence of 10 million who labor in the toughest jobs that you can find in America, in the shadows. It means legalizing the presence of dreamers more than 1 million strong, so they never fear deportation back to their home country. And it means addressing issues in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Honduras, like reducing violence there or addressing the historic drought that Guatemala is suffering, so that families don't have to make that 2,000-mile journey and come to this country in the first place. In other words, let's remind us who we are at our best, and then make sure that we live those values going forward. Republican, independent, Democrat alike, we're Americans first before we're anything else.
I agree with you, but I just want to ask you, what could you do in the first 100 days, specifically policy-wise, that could get some of these things done?
The legislation that I just described, we will send to Congress within the first 100 days. The executive actions that I was asked about by Maureen earlier, reuniting those families who've been separated, committing to never detaining another child or family again, instituting a family case management program by executive order within the purview of the president to make sure that at a fraction of the cost, we restore the dignity to those families, make sure that they are okay, and if they are able to stay under our asylum laws in this country, that they reveal their genius here, they contribute to our greatness and our success, and we, not they, are the ultimate beneficiaries. Those are some actions we could take right on day one.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berlin. Next question comes from Natalia Orlando.
Hi, thank you for being here. I know you touched on it in the answer for the first question, but what would you do to stop climate change? Like, what specific actions did you take from it hindering our planet?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We will have enforceable limits on greenhouse gas emissions every single year of our administration and pass them into law so that they are binding for the administrations that follow ours. It is only in that way that we'll get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050, be halfway there by the year 2030. That will require us to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, oil and gas, and fully embrace renewable energy like wind and solar, and invest in the next generation of technologies like battery storage technology to distribute that wind and solar when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, but we still need to be able to electrify our homes. It means putting farmers in the driver's seat and paying them for the environmental services that they want to provide. Planting cover crops year-round to make sure that we pull more carbon out of the air, sequester more of it in the soil, use no-till and precision-till farming, regenerative agriculture to store more of that there. Providing an incentive to keep more land in conservation and not cultivate every square inch under ownership as we are incentivized today to do under the current Farm Bill. In other words, if all of us do all that we can, this country can set the example for the rest of the world, which is necessary if we're going to convene the other powers of the planet to have them do their part as well. Because even if we were able to flick a switch today and stop emitting any greenhouse gas emissions, that's only 16% of the problem for the planet. And if we're going to keep ourselves from warming another 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial revolution levels, we're going to need every country to do their part. So establishing that moral authority, being the indispensable country again, using every opportunity like last week's G7 summit or our trade deals to leverage our power and our influence to help other countries to meet their commitments, that is how we're going to confront climate change before it is too late.
Thank you. I agree. I think it's going to take the U.S. to lead the way, and that's not happening right now. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you, Natalia.
Appreciate it.
Facebook question coming in from Dan Pelletier. He asks, what makes you qualified to be president of the United States?
Great question. So a little bit of my background. Small business owner. Started a technology firm in one of the places you'd least expect to find one, in El Paso, Texas. At the time, the third poorest urban county in the United States of America, but awash in talent, just looking for an opportunity or a channel through which it can express itself. And so we took that chance on our hometown, took that chance together, and were successful. Served on the El Paso City Council for 6 years, and every single week of those 6 years, I held a town hall meeting just like this one. Listened to my constituents, learned from them, reminded myself who it is I'm accountable to at the end of the day, and brought that same philosophy to service when I was in Congress, holding town halls every month for the 6 years I was there. And though every day I served, I was in a Republican majority, we were able to get things done. Expanding mental health care access for veterans and saving lives in the process. Protecting public lands in an administration that was diminishing the size of our public lands. And investing in both the security and safety of the U.S.-Mexico border, as well as our ability to facilitate trade and travel and improve our quality of life. We did that by seeing beyond our differences of party affiliation and putting this country first. And then lastly, last year when we ran for Senate in those 254 counties of Texas, we wrote no one off, regardless of how red their county was, and we visited places that voted for Donald Trump 96% in 2016. But we did so because they're every bit as deserving of our attention, of our respect, of being heard, of being listened to, of being served. And the only way I can do that is if I show up and listen to them first. We also showed up to the bluest places in Texas to make sure that they were not taken for granted, that their stories were included in our campaign. And at the end of the day, we won more votes than any Democrat had in the history of Texas. We won independence, importantly, for the first time in decades. And almost 500,000 Republicans, like my mom, voted for me, not despite, but because of the proud progressive agenda that we brought to their communities and because we included them. That's what it's going to take, a movement of Americans, regardless of the differences, to defeat Donald Trump. And that's what it's going to take, Dan, to your question via Facebook, to make sure that we bring this deeply divided country together again in the face of historic threats that we've never seen before and in the ability to pursue an ambitious agenda that will distinguish and define this country forever after.
Christy St. Laurent, our next question.
All right.
Hi.
You kind of touched on a lot of what I was going to ask, but I want to drill down a little bit.
Sure.
You served in the House. You know how things work and don't work. How do you see, beyond executive order, getting your grand ideas through? Do you see yourself going to the floor of the House or the Senate? Do you anticipate using a strong cabinet? Do you anticipate starting the ball with executive orders? How is it you see your plans coming to fruition?
Yeah, great question. I think it's clear that politics, as usual, is not working for this country. And when we fail to make progress on any of the issues that we just talked about, from climate to healthcare to immigration to the economy, then we give fertile ground to the kind of demagogues like Donald Trump, who will use our justified anger and frustration, but turn it against the most defenseless and vulnerable, as he has done. So it's going to have to take a different kind of politics. I will begin with this campaign by making sure that we're not just looking at the White House, but looking to build a majority in the United States Senate. In that historic Texas run, we helped to turn 2 congressional districts from red to blue, thereby helping to flip the House of Representatives. We helped to elect 17 African American women to judicial positions in Harris County, home to Houston, Texas, the most diverse city in the country, thereby changing the face, literally, of criminal justice. So let's do that across the country. Let's help candidates at every level of the ballot, especially in those federal races that will determine the majorities with whom we can work. But if, for whatever reason, we are unsuccessful in changing the composition of the U.S. Senate, of replacing Mitch McConnell, then let's first appeal to them directly. And you mentioned going to the Capitol, and I will do that. In fact, I believe there is an office in the United States Capitol reserved for the President of the United States that I don't think has ever been used. Let's start using it. Let's keep office hours and allow any Republican or Democrat or independent to come in and share with us what's on their mind, see if we can't find the common ground to pursue the common good for this country. And then, failing that, let's make sure that we go to their home districts and talk about these issues. And in fact, listen to people on these issues, because I think the consensus, the political will, the public sentiment is there right now on climate change, on guns, on healthcare. It's just not fully reflected in those who hold power. So if those who hold power won't do the right thing, let's go around them to the people and put them in power.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
We've got about 90 seconds left. This is a tough question, but I've got to ask you. You're coming back here, and it's clear, I've watched you for 9 months now. There's a righteous anger, and few would begrudge you that, given what happened in your hometown. How do you avoid letting that consume you?
You know, you either give up in the face of the kind of terror that we saw in El Paso, where 22 people were killed in a city that loses 18 people in a given year. You're either consumed by the suffering and the tragedy of it. You either accept it as an act of God or a future or a fate, or you stand up and do something about it. And I feel so compelled to do that right now, especially given where this country is and what we just saw in El Paso, especially given the fact that the judgment I fear most of all is that of my children and your children. And they are counting on us right now to do the right thing. That power is still within our grasp. But if we wait more than 10 years, we've lost it on climate. If we wait another day, we've lost it on gun violence. If we wait to confront the endemic racism, the white supremacist terrorism that is the #1 domestic law enforcement threat in this country, then that's on all of us, because we can take no solace or comfort in blaming it on the president or on a given political party. In government of, by, and for the people, the responsibility rests on all of us, and I take that responsibility very seriously.
Congressman O'Rourke, that wraps up the televised portion of this town hall. We're going to continue online and on our mobile app. Join us there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.